Welcome to Gorilla Sports Off Ice. Today's episode is presented by Trusted American Mortgage. Trusted American salary-based mortgage consultants want to help you get into a lower mortgage rate and lower your monthly payments. Go to trustedamerican.com to see how much they can save you today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hello and welcome to the show. Yes, we'll talk about the power play as well. How's it going, everybody? The Monday after Thanksgiving. Welcome to Gorilla Sports Off Ice here in the Gorilla Sports Studios, powered by Trusted American Mortgage. My name is Jesse Montano, and that is Meghan Angley back in the studio. Meghan, we missed you last week. How was your week?
I miss covering the team, being around the team.
Doesn't miss us. Can't help but notice. Didn't say that. Anyways,
and
Chloe, take that
being
personally
around
like I am.
You guys, no, you guys are part of the team. And so it's good to be back, and a little sad that the Avs are going on the road, but I'm so glad we'll get to dabble with some of the post-game coverage that we were trying out when the team is on the road. For that Jets game a while back, I loved it. So really excited to get back into things because I feel disconnected from all of my people.
It was pretty cold, and you were posting pictures laying on the beach. So I
want everyone to know I got eaten alive by bugs. I feel like that makes it better.
All right, that does help. That makes me feel a little bit better. That makes my pettiness feel a little bit better. Well, I'm super glad to have you back. Miss talking hockey with you. Happy to have you back around the rink. You and I were at the game together a couple nights ago. So it's just nice to have you back. Did you guys do it like a traditional? You were in, not to be like fully doxing you, but like you were in Puerto Rico. Did you do like a standard Thanksgiving type meal, or was it more? Was the food more like culturally appropriate and not your traditional Thanksgiving mashed potatoes?
You know, my mom has always incorporated Puerto Rican food in our Thanksgiving. So to me, it was very normal food, but arroz con gandules is a dish that we have pretty often and at Thanksgiving, and it's delicious.
I thought you were, I didn't realize that you were listening or naming it. I thought you were about to just start going in Spanish. I was like, whoa, was not what I was expecting. That was not what I was opening the door for, but go off. So I'm sorry. What is that?
It is rice with pigeon peas is what it directly translates to, but it has so much more than that. It has.
Okay, hold on. What are pigeon peas?
Garbanzo beans.
Okay, all right. Perfect.
Interchangeable.
Yes.
But it's so delicious. It has ham, and it has two different types of ham meat too. And so she sautés the ham cubes, but then there's also like I'm trying to think of what it's called, but it's another type of ham in there. There's olives, there's pimento, and so it's really good.
So like chicharrones or something like that.
It's like chicharrón.
Okay. All right.
And then we had a dessert called tembleque, and it's like a jiggly, kind of a flan-like substance. That was really good. I like flan too. Had some flan.
No, see, I'm not a flan guy.
I know my dad is not a flan guy either. We had to nix the Puerto Rican stuffing a while ago because my mom made it with ground beef and prunes, and it was not our favorite dish. So we got rid of that one.
So it's just like, it's like your regular stuffing, but with that stuff in there, or
no
is
bread,
it
like no breading? It was super different.
Oh, that's the best part.
Different. We nixed that a while ago. So there was turkey, which was pretty traditional. So a little mix,
a little bit of both.
A lot of Puerto Rican food on the whole while we were there, which was really good.
Okay, there you go. See, my parents, a lot of my extended family is from New Mexico, Albuquerque, Hatch Valley, things like that. So like we've always had like red chili, not instead of gravy, but like for the longest time.
I like that.
Yeah, people go red chili instead of, over gravy. Just little things like that are always incorporated in on like when we were younger. Yeah, you'd go back, we go stay with our family down in Hatch, and like there's green chili on everything. There's it's all just a little bit different, which, not as different as like what you're describing, but when you've like always had a little bit of that incorporated, then you get to go like full send on the, something a little bit different. That's awesome. Glad to hear that it was a good holiday.
It
Holidays
was
can be a little
really
bit stressful.
nice to be with family. It was a little stressful too, but it was good to be with family that I don't ordinarily get to see.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. Glad you're back. We've missed you around here. We've needed you around here. So let's talk a little bit about what we've got going here. We may be joining the Avs road trip. We've planned this whole time to skip these first couple games of this road trip because, like Megan said, we had such a great response to one of the shows that we did earlier this season when the Avs were on the road, doing some shows here in studio, intermission, post game. So we're gonna flex style a little bit this week as well. So we'll have plenty to talk through. But Megan, it's so hard because this Avs season right now feels to me like the embodiment of the we're over or we're back, it's over, we're back, it's over gif. Like that, I just think is this entire Avs season, that every time they start building a little bit, you take a couple steps back, or you get one guy into the lineup and two guys come out. You felt really, really good about that shootout win over Vegas going into Thanksgiving. Then you come out of it with a not great loss against Dallas, and then a really disappointing effort against Edmonton. Just your take, having been away for a week, kind of rest and recharge and watch things from afar. Just what is your take on 12? What are 13 and 12 at the 25 game mark?
I think it has been hard because 10 by 10 game segments, there have been highs and lows. Even in the opening 10, they actually salvaged the back half of those games with Justus Annanen's help, a better team playing in front of them to play 500 hockey, and that's still where they sit. But it feels disappointing just in looking at the caliber of player that still is in the lineup, still healthy and available to them. And I think that you see the success they built on what was a difficult road trip. For it to be nearly perfect, a 7-4 win over the reigning Stanley Cup champions, it was impressive, and they strung together good wins. Washington team, also another great win there. Philly game, maybe it felt more neutral, but still an important win to collect then a 6-4-0 record in the last 10 games. And they're still at like 520 in terms of the whole of the hockey that they've played through this point. Given the nature of the injuries and how they have just mounted in a way that feels impossible to believe at this point, I don't feel so bad about the team, the direction that they're headed, but I can resonate with the sentiment that right now it still doesn't feel really good, though, that they put together these great games at the beginning of this road trip, and then they come back and it just feels like, what? You were building such good momentum. What happened? The things that you were doing were bringing you success. Why wasn't that repeatable, at least, even amidst some of the frustrating news around injuries? And I think that's what makes the Edmonton game feel disappointing, and even the Dallas one, because in the Dallas one in particular, they pushed to bring it within striking distance, and it was too little too late. But it was a game that was within reach at one point. And I think that's what's made this recent stretch of hockey feel a little bit sad to watch. I had my aunt actually watch hockey with me.
I was going to say, there was a comment in here about I made my family watch hockey with me, and I made them watch the Edmonton game. Well, Megan's about to one-up you.
I made my aunt watch the Tampa Bay game. It's like, hey, because her and my grandma would watch random hockey games just to feel close to what I did for work, because hockey's very foreign to Puerto Ricans in Mayagüez specifically. And so we tuned into the Tampa game, and it was so bad. It was so embarrassing. She's
like, is this the way it's supposed to go?
Yeah, she's like, so unimpressed. Like, you cover these guys?
Yeah.
She's so unimpressed. And it does feel like such a far cry from Avs hockey, what we know it to be. I think that's where there's expectation that's set around this team and why it feels disappointing. And so when we dive into different conversations around Mikko Rantanen and the power play, I think that's the root of it all, why it feels so disappointing to have this top unit not going on the power play. And Rantanen, he's such an interesting guy. I'll wait to even dig into that more. But it feels disappointing that the team isn't more competitive at the start of games, that it is sort of still this coming from behind thing that's happening, even in the games that they're winning. I think given the situation with injuries, I still have so much confidence in what they're able to do. I think Jared Bednar talked about it this morning.
We're going to play it.
Cool.
Yep.
Just that, they're not expecting to have this many injuries for the rest of the year. What was it? 6 guys out
6
at any given time. That won't be the case forever this season.
It's because I asked, and we'll get there, but I asked Jared Bednar about, like, look, you guys say all the right things, and you guys, I know you guys try not to focus on the guys out of the lineup, but, like, at what point does this just become extremely frustrating? And he got into it a little bit, but Megan, I do think I'm with you overall. Like, I was talking to some of the folks just upstairs because I've been out of the office and on the road with the team, and then holidays and a bunch of people were out, so just kind of catching up with folks upstairs earlier, and this is just an interesting season. Like, it's been a long time since the Avs have been in a situation where it's felt uncertain. Probably got to go pre-COVID, because like that COVID shortened season, like they were barreling towards the playoffs and playing well and things felt really positive. Then they win the President's Trophy in the COVID shortened season. They win the Stanley Cup the season after that. And even last year, where it didn't feel great at stretch of the season, with a week to go, they were in position to win the division. It was them, Dallas, and Winnipeg. We're all kind of jostling to see who could collect the most points in the final 7 days to win the division. So, like, playoffs were never in question. And again, even last year is what I mean. Playoffs never in question last year, where it felt like not a great season. So you probably have to go back to the 2018-2019 season to find the last time that you felt watching the Avs like it was truly up and down, and they're, collecting points to stay in the playoff hunt. And like, we're at the quarter pole. They were sitting in a playoff spot on Thanksgiving, which is that kind of unofficial line of demarcation of, you want to make sure that you're there to give yourself a chance to be in position come the end of the season. But I think that that's part of the reason why this feels so icky to fans out there, is like, yeah, this is a pretty foreign feeling for about a half a decade now. Of, what do you mean they're not winning 7 of every 10 game stretch comfortably? What do you mean they're not right at the top of the division, trying to wrestle away top in the Western Conference? What do you mean they're not winning 8 games in a row and scoring 4 or 5 goals in all those games? So, like, I think you're seeing a season play out here that just doesn't feel great. Because as Vaguely points out here in the chat, like, right now they woke up today after that loss last night and other things that happened. They're not in a playoff spot right now. Again, like, I believe they're sitting 1 point outside of the playoffs. So, like, I'm not overly concerned with, are they sitting in a playoff spot in December? But, like, we're past the quarter mark of the season. You are getting to the point where you want to start keeping a loose eye on the standings and how many points back are you of these guys, and who else are you chasing? Who's coming up behind you? Like, it is crazy. It feels crazy to say this, but we have now officially entered into like phase 2 of this season, where you're losing it's super early.
Yeah.
You're losing that. It's not that early anymore. And you want to start feeling more solid about where you're at. I'm with you. I feel very confident that this team will eventually get back healthy. And not only the health, Megan, you mentioned it on last night's postgame, 2 nights ago on the postgame Q&A. This is the last place team in terms of on ice PDO, meaning they are the most unlucky team on the ice. Forget everything that's happening away from the ice with injuries and Gabe Landeskog and all that stuff. When the game is actually being played, they're not getting any luck. So, like, there's all of that you have to hope and imagine turns at some point, and this team starts to look more like the team that we expect, and they are going to start stringing together 7 of 10, 8 of 10, and put themselves comfortably back in position. But I get why it feels not great to people out there right now.
I think going into this year with the uncertainty around Landeskog and at one point even Nichushkin, I didn't expect this to be like the cup season where they clinch the West and they can just kind of coast into the end of the year, into the playoffs comfortably. I look at the title defense season that followed, and there's so many similarities to this season. There was a time where it was just Mikko Rantanen carrying the team on his back. Players like Makar and McKinnon out of the lineup that year. And Evan Rodriguez was a person that they were looking to because they were struggling to find goal scoring. And he was somebody who had that finishing touch, at least at that point in the season when they needed it most. And I see so many similarities to what's happening right now. Right now, in this recent stretch, the goal scoring is down on the whole. I think that goes back to a little bit of the luck component, because when you look at the creation process, it's still very good for the Avs. Their top players are still creating at a clip that should reward them more than they've seen. And it's something they have to work through. This happens to players. It's not an excuse for the lack of production from some of the top 6 players, but I think it's something that inevitably will receive progression. Whereas the rest of the league, I was actually just about to pull up some of the other teams that I had a suspicion were benefiting from a high PDO. And I was just trying to see if it was like readily available here for me to pull up.
Well, so while you're looking for that, let me just, so the Avs currently sit 2 points out of a wild card spot right now, 2 points back of both Calgary and Edmonton, who hold down the final 2 wild card spots. Go ahead.
In the Central, specifically 4 points back of Dallas, 10 points back of Minnesota, who raised my suspicion.
Yes.
I don't doubt that they're 10 points ahead of Colorado at this point with a game in hand. So I don't doubt that the Wild are going to keep themselves in this conversation. I'm not going to discount that much. They have the best, most favorable PDO at the moment.
Yep.
It reminds me of Vancouver a little bit.
Yes.
And honestly, their postseason struggles were very reasonably goaltending, losing Brock Besser. So I'm not going to say Vancouver just got lucky. I think they deserved a better fate as well in their playoff run. But I do think that what's happening in the Central Division, when I look at Dallas, Winnipeg, and Wild as kind of the head horses in this race, I have very high confidence the Avs can take one of those guys easily. And I think that's why I have the confidence that I do in this team.
You're 4 points back at the Stars.
And I think if I remember correctly, a lot of games being decided outside of regulation for Dallas. I don't know if that's correct off the top of my head, but I think that they are still in this fight. It just doesn't feel great because, to your earlier point, they're not normally in this position. They are normally more decidedly winning games, and I just think it's an expectation issue a little bit on our part. We expect a lot from this team because the way they're constructed is so dang good. And the way that they execute when they execute is pretty hard to beat. I think that's a different discussion around maybe why other teams are able to counter the Avs better than ever before. I think there are parts of their game that have become a little bit predictable to other teams. Doesn't mean it's any less competitive. They just have to counter that a little bit. And I think that's a growing pain that they're going through right now on the power play specifically.
Just back to your point about Minnesota. This is one thing I pound the drum on this every season. Every year, there's one team that people either don't expect to be in the playoff hunt, weren't in the playoff race the season before. Nothing was expected of them. Everything goes right and the vibes are high and things are just clicking. The Avs in 2013, 10 years ago, which is crazy. 2013, 2014 were that team. And I remember that was when it really got on my radar of like, that's crazy that everything is going right for this Avalanche team. And if you look around the league every single year, there is one team that benefits from this. It was Vancouver last year. Like you said, it's Minnesota this year. Doesn't matter. I'm with you. I really do think that it will average out for the Avs. And again, if you get all the way to the end of the season and they end up with 6 guys missing for the entire season across, different guys moving in and out, and they end up 32nd in PDO, yeah, you could convince me that they could miss the playoffs. Sure. Because that's literally every single thing that could go wrong going wrong. And it's really hard to overcome that for anybody. But I do agree with you. And I don't even think it's necessarily like an expectation issue. I just think, like Megan, my first year covering this team was a 48-point season. That next year, there were no expectations for what they were going to do. And when the Avs went on a run to the playoffs, it was really fun to see a young team figuring out how to win and how to win big games and how to bounce back and, win a game 82 and things like that. When there's expectations, like this is what it feels like. There's a question in here about, are the vibes as bad for the team as it seems from the outside? No, I would not say the vibes are bad. Like this is a group that has tight-knit friendships, that has guys that hang out away from the rink, guys that have won Stanley Cups together. The core has been together for a long time. Like this is a group that likes to be around each other. But what I will say about the vibes is they're frustrated. They are frustrated with this situation that they have found themselves in, that the injuries are piling up. The results they're getting on the ice aren't great. And then you just won't convince me that Nate's comments after the Tampa Bay game of everything was going in and we couldn't stop it wasn't just the tiniest bit of frustration bubbling over with the goalies. Again this season, you finish with an expected goals against around 3 and 8 are in the back of your net. Like, I just think that they are frustrated with the fact that nothing seems to be going right now. And they are having to scratch and claw for any positive that they can pull out of games. That to me is the sense that I get on the vibes around this room.
I think they're interconnected. I wanted to correct when I said Dallas pushing games outside of regulation. It was Edmonton I was confusing them with. A lot of games being won outside of regulation. Just clarify that. But to your point, the frustration, the morale around the room, it's not any different or lower than I've seen it at other low points in other seasons prior to this. And I think that's a point worth making, that I have seen them more demoralized than they look right now. And I've seen them bounce back from a more lower demoralized place than they are at presently. So that's why I'm not worried in terms of them being able to overcome it from a confident standpoint. But it is worth noting that it's a little low around the group right now because they like winning.
Yep.
I don't mind seeing them visibly upset or frustrated or sad. Maybe I'm siding sad there.
Whatever it is that they're feeling. Yes.
Down after bad games that they felt they should have played better in or deserved a better fate. And it's because they care. I like to see a team that cares. I think that you've lost the team if you don't see that. And that's also why I don't look at it as a leadership issue or a coaching issue. Has Bednar lost his team? They all still care a lot. And that's also where I have faith that they can overcome this feeling of kind of being low. And that's where I think the goaltending thing comes into play. I think it was interesting that Rantanen said that Annunen was surprised by it. I think the front office had to make a difficult decision, and it's not Annunen's fault alone. Goaltending put them in that position, and so that's just as much Alexander Georgiev's fault as it is Annunen. But it's also, if the team loses confidence in its goaltending and doesn't play very well in front of them as a result, that's also a team issue. It doesn't even necessarily mean like it's solely Annunen's load to bear by himself. But if the team is that affected by what's going on in net, you have to make a decision too. Like, well, how do we support the team then in that case? And how do we also get the team to separate their game from confidence or lack thereof in their goaltending? And I think we have to be honest with ourselves about how much that actually is interconnected and how difficult it is to separate those things, even though professional athletes should.
Well, and so I want to talk about the goaltending And I do just want to, you know, Megan, I say it all the time. You and I, our job is not to pump the team up. It's not to put the team down. It's not to make excuses. It's not to defend the team. It's not to cheer for the team. It's to provide context with the access that we have to what we believe is going on kind of a deeper level. And I really do think that it's what you just said there about like everything is going wrong. Everything is going wrong for this Avs team. And I agree with your assessment of like where they're at morale wise. And I just think that there's a level of frustration that they're battling through. And then I really do think, Megan, I'm going to disagree with you on the goaltending part. I actually don't like in some of these games that have been bad. The score has gotten away from them. Goaltenders haven't been able to make a stop. Again, I'm using the Tampa one because it was the most recent, but I could pull a couple. I saw a lot of people blaming the defense in front of Annunen in Tampa. The advanced metrics just do not support that. That it was horrifically bad and Annunen did not have a chance. I think the Avs are, for better or worse, and we can say it's fair, it's not fair, whatever. The Avs needed, and I thought Georgiev did this for them last season. The Avs needed their goalies to step up and be their best players in these first 10 games when so much has not gone their way. And they just haven't gotten that. And I think there's a level of stability that they're looking for with Scott Wedgwood in the backup role. And I think stability and predictability is the one thing that has been missing the most from this team this season. And I want to get into all of it. And I want to start by hearing from Scott Wedgwood, who we talked to yesterday. And there's a couple things that he said why I think he's actually going to be very good for this team as much as a backup goalie can be. So I want to get into all that after I remind you guys about our great friends over at Landmark Lincoln. Head on over to landmarklincoln.com. Check out the all-new 2024 Lincoln Corsair GT plug-in hybrid. Again, landmarklincoln.com. Check out the latest offers and incentives, including credible tax incentives on the all-new Corsair GT plug-in hybrid. Go to landmarklincoln.com or stop into the #1 Lincoln dealer in Colorado to see if you qualify for no payments for up to 90 days. Again, that's landmarklincoln.com or stop in at the corner of Broadway and Bellevue today. See why they've been Colorado's trusted Lincoln dealer since 1911. Megan, I was frustrated yesterday reading through some of what people were talking about with the goalie trade, and people are saying this needs to address the issues. This trade was not about fixing everything. This was not about, the Avs goaltending problems are solved. This was nowhere near that. I really think that this was about getting some stability and having confidence in knowing we can roll our backup goalie out there and it's just going to be a normal backup goalie night. And it firmly puts Alexander Georgiev in the one spot. There is no more controversy. And I think this is the Avs front office's attempt at just throwing some cold water on everything and just making things a little bit quieter around the building. And like, hey, there is no more who's going to play. We don't know what we're going to get. People frustrated with Annunen, players frustrated with. To me, this was about settling things down. Do you have a kind of broad strokes take on it before we hear from Wedgie?
Well, I don't think we are disagreeing on the conversation around the team playing in front of the goaltender. It matters. Like, you'd like professional athletes to be able to separate that.
Yes.
But if we're being honest with ourselves, it clearly did influence how the team played. And I don't think that is, again, Justus Annunen's fault and his alone.
Let me ask you a quick question here. Do you think it affected the way they played going into the game, or once the game started, they changed based on how the goaltender was playing?
In game.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think
I
body
completely agree with
language,
that.
and I think since some of those were going in clean on Anunen in this recent stretch, there was a lack of confidence around
Yep.
him. And again, we wouldn't be in this position if Georgiev had played as the true starter from the beginning. But because he didn't, and that became a question that we didn't have an answer to, Justus Anunen being the second line of defense there and being just an untested goalie is where this became a problem. He is still a goaltending prospect, but they're not in a position to develop him because they need a backup goaltender right now, especially given the situation around the starter, Georgiev, in being someone that runs so hot and cold and can be a little emotionally volatile. They need something, to your point, a little more predictable.
Yes.
That's what Justus Anunen couldn't offer them. It's not to say there is not upside that he can find in Nashville. I actually think it's a better situation for him because UC Saros is a proven starter. And so there isn't this, well, I'm trying to yank that conversation back in my direction. And it's less likely to fall apart with UC Saros as the starter because he's going to just be a starter. He's done that for years. Whereas with Georgiev coming to Colorado, even then, his numbers declined year by year. He thought he deserved starter minutes, just couldn't find that opportunity in New York, comes here and is still trying to prove that he's a starter in this league. That's the issue. It's very unique to the circumstance of the Colorado Avalanche. And so, for that reason, to your point, Wedgwood brings something interesting. I know his numbers, especially like on the whole, maybe don't jump off the page at you. But I think what's important is he understands his role as a backup. He's embraced his role as a backup. But similarly, he had a career high in starts last year with 12 or 13 starts in a row at one point. He has proven track record then in being able to handle that. Whereas with Anunen, it was still a gamble. It was one that could have paid off, but the Avs couldn't afford to take that risk at this point. And I agree. I think it is like pouring cold water over a situation. And I also think there will be parts of this behind the scenes that we will never fully know. But I do think that there was growing concern or lack of confidence around the goaltending on the whole, and this was a way to address it in the immediate. I don't doubt that they are done in looking at that position and seeing how they can make it better. So I don't think this is the organization's way of saying we have full confidence in Alexander Georgiev as a starter moving forward.
No, I agree with you. And there's a couple points that I want to touch on there that I'm completely in lockstep with you on. Of the UC Saros is going to start 60 games this year. If you were the backup, he would start 60 to 65 games. You know what I mean? Like, they just traded Yaroslav Askarov, a much better goaltending prospect than Justus Anunen, because they said, yeah, we just don't have the starts here for you. The Nashville Predators brought in Scott Wedgwood in the summer because they said, we've got our set and forget starter. We need a guy who's cool playing 15 to 25 games and otherwise sitting there and being the supporter. The Avs, as we talked about on this show earlier this season, for the first time since Georgiev had been here, had kind of backed off from we're not sure who our starter is. The Avs could not afford to have one goalie trying to prove he can be a consistent starter and one goalie try to prove he belongs in the NHL. You can't have two goalies trying to prove something every night. And then the issue that they ran into right at the end of the Anunen experiment is you couldn't even give Georgiev nights off. He had to come in relief the last two nights off that he was supposed to have. You know what I mean? Like, so you weren't even getting the benefit of playing your backup because your starter kept having to go in because the score was running away from them. Let's run Scott Wedgwood here. Hear what he had to say. Because again, for as much of what a backup goalie is, now, before we do this, I just want to say vaguely, I'm with you. We were hard riding the Askarov train right before the season when his name was out there. So I know CMAC was in on that one. The Avs have tried. This is also a great representation of where the goalie market is at. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But for as much as you can about a backup goalie, I think there's some stuff here from Scott Wedgwood that is just interesting and I think will be impactful. So let's hear from him yesterday.
It's actually kind of funny. I was sleeping in the hotel in Minnesota. We got there after the game last night and heard a couple little whistle ringings and couldn't figure out where it was coming from. I looked like a tourist in my room, kind of trying to figure it out. And I opened the peephole, and Barry Trotz was standing right there, and it was kind of, okay, what did I do wrong, kind of thing. And he came in, and we had a nice conversation. So, he's a gentleman, takes care of his guys and stuff. So, conversation with him, obviously, let me know what was going on, and then goalie coach Vanderklok came up, talked to him, and then kind of the agency and that kind of stuff. The traditional trade things, and wife was sleeping, so tried to wake her up, but couldn't get the luck of the draw there, and then try to get back to sleep and get some rest before today.
What were your thoughts when you heard it was Colorado?
I was excited, honestly. Funny enough, I've kind of envisioned playing here over time. You talk about teams where you want to be and stuff, and I've been fortunate, with time in Dallas, Arizona, Nashville, now here. I mean, I'm hitting some good cities. Can't forget Jersey, where I was drafted and things like that. But obviously played against these guys a ton over the years and had some battles, and it's nice to be on this side of their skill set. It's obviously high talented guys and elite players. So, they're in the race, obviously a cup contender, and that's kind of what you want to play for. And it's obviously exciting to be a part of somebody that wants you.
UC Parkland, do you know anything about the coaching staff or how you feel?
No, not on a personal level. So watched them, pregame skate as goalies for years. As you arrive in rinks and they're on the ice, you kind of just pay attention and watch. And obviously get a chance here in a few minutes to talk to everybody. I was able to talk to Ben Nahr and a few coaches and people yesterday. Obviously texted me quick, but just kind of said we'll see you tomorrow. It's not much you can do in 6 hours in advance.
You mentioned the texting. Have you had a chance to talk with many of the guys, kind of start that introduction process?
I know Ross Colton, Miles Wood, and Kivi Rancha from years past in different teams and stuff like that. So, quick, recap with them. But they got their business too. Back to back, it's a quick turnaround, things like that. So, we'll all get situated here, and I'll blend in pretty quickly, I feel.
Yeah, are you backing up Yuri tonight?
I am.
How do you feel about that? Just it all happening so quickly?
It's quick. I mean, obviously, a little bit of mental warfare with trying to get logistics. I got an 8-month-old at home, so kind of breaking the heart a little bit, not being able to see her. Probably as much as I was going to, obviously living there. So we'll get that sorted. The logistics side is always tough, but they needed a goalie shake-up, whatever the case may be here. I've read the reports. I'm a hockey fan. I watch the entire league, and I want to help. Regardless, it's just another mind to talk to, someone with some experience. The goalie position is not easy, regardless if you're the best or the worst at it. It's a grind every day, and you want to be the best for your team. You can't win a game as a goalie. No matter what you can do, you can never win it. So, we can work together, get some consistency between the two of us, whatever the team needs. We'll bond and get the ship righted. And obviously, it's tough to be consistent. And if we can find that for this team, there'll be some noise made.
How does your wife feel about moving with an 8-month-old?
Oh, she's a trooper. She's driven across the country a few times. Dog. She's been stopped at the border with our car. I mean, she could write a book, let alone me, on all this stuff. But just told her you need to take care of her right now. We'll get the hard labor done by some people willing to work for it, and then I'll see them soon. And I think I might fly back and grab some stuff for the road trip because it was just an overnight bag with the quick trip to Mini.
What are some of the difficulties as a goalie, just joining a new team mid-season, learning the system, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, tendencies on certain players. A lot of it's not crazy. It's not the puck. I mean, it's really wherever the shot comes from. But there's just be tendencies, what they want to do in the penalty kill, what they might give up in certain situations, shot lines, layering of the D zone, certain things that was a change in Nashville. I've never played behind the layer, and obviously got to change to a new system again. But when it comes down to it, the puck's coming at you, get in the way of it, find a way to do it, and it'll be fun. Obviously, seen them play for a while and kind of know a little bit about it. But it's always different when you put on a New Jersey, but it's fun.
Being in the Central Division, what has your reaction playing opposite the Colorado Avalanche been?
Oh, just, they're never out of it. I think that's been the hardest thing is you feel like you got a 2 or 3 goal lead and you might be able to put them away in the third period, and all of a sudden the game's, 1 goal away, 10 minutes left in the third, and now all of a sudden they have a lead before it's over. You push them to overtime, and then you put those, Mikko and Kale and Nate on the ice in the overtime, and you're like, okay, let's find a way to win. So you have that kind of threat and the ability to come back no matter the score. It's always been a powerhouse, and the fans are passionate. I've played in this building. It's obviously interesting to try and keep them out of it. They seem to come back to life every time that a few of those guys touch the puck. And depth team, they'll find ways to make you pay for it.
Other than the consistency that you're going to try and find here, what do you feel that your strength is coming to this team?
Well, I think I've been kind of known as a room guy. I think I can blend that, and it's been one of those things as a backup goalie for the better part of my career. You got to find a way to stay in the league somehow, and trying to mesh top to bottom of the room, high contracts, low contracts, old, young. We're a team, and you can't win without everyone, regardless of the night. You got guys that can do more any given night, but I think if you can blend it, make it a little bit more of just like a group project, and kind of the best way to put it, it's a lot more fun when you have everybody pulling on the rope, right? So, but then skill-wise, I think you look at my career, sure, there's great numbers and bad numbers throughout seasons and things like that. I'm going to give you everything I got every night. There's no question about that in my mind. Played on some teams that were at the bottom of the league early in my career and found my way in the NHL. I'm very proud of what I've done, where I've been, the ups and downs I've gone through, and now being on a team that's pushing for a cup. I was able to watch Tampa in the bubble there. I was the third goalie for them and got my hands on it. It's no better feeling in the world. So with what these guys did a few years ago, and obviously you want to do it every year, it'll be fun to go on that race again.
You mentioned the passionate fans in Colorado too. Do you feel any pressure by the goaltending situation that they might kind of push on you?
Sure. I mean, they're obviously going to have their opinions no matter what, but what happens in that room and what we see in ourselves is obviously a little more important. You want to play for them and make it fun for them as well. But once you start diving into the comments, there's always going to be somebody with something to say, right? So, I forget who said the quote, but whoever's supposed to be giving you advice is in that room and in this management system, and they went out and got me, and that's what I'm going to bank on and show them what I got.
Last ones, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
All right,
Thank
nice
you
meeting
so
y'all.
much.
Well, there we go. In a huge echo, probably. There we go. That's Scott Wedgwood yesterday. We talked to him before the game against Edmonton. He backed up. Sounds like a bit of a whirlwind 24 hours for him. Probably why they didn't want him to have to jump right into a game. But Megan, to me, we have not talked about Mikko. That is coming up here soon. What I liked was when he talked about Georgiev. You get in there, get to know him, paraphrasing here, support him, help him out. This is a guy who comes in, like you pointed out earlier, Megan, knows his role, understands I'm coming in here to be a stabilizing factor. He's been around winning teams. He's been around bad teams. He's been around old teams. He's been around young teams. This is just a guy who can come in and just provide something in that backup role that UC Sandin couldn't. Experience, a little bit of leadership, being a cheerleader for the guys. I think Alexander Georgiev and UC Sandin probably had a good relationship. I think they were friends, but UC Sandin wanted his job. Understandably, that's not a criticism of UC Sandin. Annunen was coming in saying, I want to be the starting goalie for the Colorado Avalanche. And Alexander Georgiev, every time he had a bad game, probably was looking over his shoulder a little bit, looking at the bench to see if they were looking down to look at Eustace. And now this just feels like they now have a guy who's going to come in and do everything he can to help make Alexander Georgiev better. And if that means getting some starts so that Georgie can reset and get his game back in order, then that's what he's going to do. I want to toss to you here because there's been a lot of people that have said, why'd they bring in Wedgwood? His numbers are just like Annanen's. It's a little bit misleading.
It is a little bit misleading, and I'm a big Justus Annunen fan, and I still believe that he is a true goaltending prospect whose upside has not been fully realized. But there is a difference in the numbers. 9 seasons of numbers behind Wedgwood versus kind of 4. Obviously, both players, the first couple of years, just breaking into the league for each. If you're looking at just this season, I think that's where there's the most similarity. 872 for Justus Annunen in save percentage, 878 for Wedgwood, 1-2-1 in his games. Do we remember how the Nashville Predators started this year and have been playing? UC Saros looked bad. At the start of this year, people were like, man, they just signed him to a crazy extension and yeeted Askarov, and this is how he's playing. Nashville has been bad. Nashville's been very bad. I'm not hanging Wedgwood or pinning those numbers on him for that. Similarly, Justus Annunen has played in front of or behind some pretty bad Avs teams as well. So again, I'm not blaming Annunen for this trade, but I don't think it's very fair to say that their numbers are similar. there's so much more experience backing what Wedgwood is. And I think that there's a personal motivation on Wedgwood's behalf to improve those numbers from where he started this year. He talks about after coming to Nashville, how he's had to work hard to earn not just being a backup, but being a backup who you can call to for a few more starts than ordinary if a team requires it, like Dallas did last year.
Right.
I think there's so much significance in the experience that's coming with Wedgwood that Justus Annunen couldn't offer. It's not his fault. He can't somehow time travel and get all those years of experience to his name. It's just something he's going to have to build over time, but it is a key difference.
So I wanted to go back and find this because Corey was doing the math while we were in Tampa, just relative to what you're talking about here. Justus Annunen save percentage since the start of last season against playoff teams, either in the playoffs last year or currently on pace to be in the playoffs this year. 828. So, I mean, he's well below average against playoff teams. So when you combine the fact that
did Corey bring up the Bakersfield Oilers?
He did.
Justus in last year had a great game against the Edmonton Oilers, who weren't really the Edmonton Oilers, and I just think it's worth mentioning.
Well, because that happened right before the playoffs, and that game was what led to a bunch of people saying that he should have been the starter game 1 against Winnipeg. I do think, and that's why I put out an unconventional tweet for me last week where I just said there's a little bit of revisionist history going on around Justus Annunen with some of the stuff that was out there. Not to exclude what you're talking about, how people were saying that him and Wedgwood were essentially the same guy. It's like there's an ocean of difference in terms of experience between these two players.
There is, and I'm defensive of Justus. I think some of his American League numbers also are a reflection of some Eagles teams that were leaky defensively in front of him, and he was, on a given night, the reason that they won a lot of games in the American League. So again, defensive of Justus Annunen, but I can see the clear difference. And I think Vaguely Sober brings up good points around the concern of if this will change game outcomes. And I think if the team feels differently about him, it absolutely can.
Well, and I we've noticed it this year when some of these pucks are in the back of the net. Heads going back, palms going up. I just think if you can eliminate some of that, it's like, yeah, he's your backup goalie, but he's not letting in 3 goals, clean shots, beating him 5-hole a night. That was what Justus did against Tampa. Specific example. But, it's just like, it helps. And it helps you feel a little bit more comfortable. And it helps you feel like you can play your game a little bit more.
They need to get out of this rut. I don't think Justus was going to play the rest of this year as bad as he was in this recent stretch. But they couldn't afford to find out.
This is another underrated part of all of this. Pavel Francouz was under contract until the end of this year. Like, as much as we can, and it's warranted, as much as we can criticize them for being in a bad goaltender situation, to the point that you made earlier about, they can't really afford to bring guys in because of how they've built this. They were expecting to have Pavel Francouz for multiple more seasons before he got hurt. And then they were expecting him to come back before he had to retire. Like, he joined the front office this last summer. And that to me almost kind of felt like, we thought you were going to be around anyways. Like this was never, the Avs did not expect to find themselves in this type of situation. So it definitely does feel like if you had 2022 Pavel Francouz right now, you probably aren't really feeling this way. He's probably getting a lot of starts and you feel pretty decent about what you have in net. You're not having to move assets. Justus Annunen is continuing to develop with the Eagles. So again, we can definitely have that conversation about they needed to address this. I think that's maybe a part that we've skipped over a little bit.
And that's where I feel more sympathy for Justus. I don't think this was the plan. The sense I got around him and the trust that he had in the organization was that he was still one more year out from being in the backup conversation. He had a great camp last year, which I think changed things, but it still was ahead of schedule, in my opinion, just based on the sense I got around him. I think that's what ultimately cost him, and it's not his fault, but it's just where the organization was at right now and where they needed him to be. And a year ago, it's not where they would have asked him to be.
Yeah.
It was not a great situation for him. I think they had to make a difficult decision.
And truthfully, Megan, like the other way to look at this too is I can't believe we just spent this much time talking about the backup goalie. That's the other slightly more pessimistic way to look at it. But like, truthfully, if all things go according to plan, you actually hope you don't hear from your backup goalie very much. That's the other part of this problem that is being underscored is, well, we are having to talk way too much about the backup goalie, and that's part of the issue. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to like take personal shots at anybody, but again, you ideally want a backup goalie like Scott Wedgwood. Come in and play 20 solid games, brother. That's all we need from you. And we'll see if they can get that. Any last thoughts on goaltending? We're running a little bit long here. There's no one else in the studio behind us, so we can go a little bit long, but just keep things moving.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on goaltending?
Not right now.
Not right now. I'm sure this will not be the last that we talk about it. Let's talk about Mikko, and then we'll go Casey and injuries, and we'll wrap things up there. Report comes out from Pierre LeBrun this past week that the Mikko Rantanen camp firmly believes that the Finnish forward could fetch upwards of $14 million on the open market should he test unrestricted free agency. Megan, there's a couple things about this. One, I think a lot of people saw that and thought, oh no, he wants to become an unrestricted free agent. I won't lie, for me, I said, well, maybe he's considering it more than ever. But what this mostly sounds like to me, Megan, is an agent who knows what he's doing and trying to get 12.25 per year across 8 years for his client with the team he is very happy playing for. What do you make of this report from Pierre LeBrun?
I think it's exactly that. There was a quote at the beginning of the year about how Mikko Rantanen enjoyed playing here because he won a Stanley Cup here and he has a chance to win more Stanley Cups here.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, maybe that's what is stoking some of the fire around the possibility of him becoming a free agent because they're not winning. Maybe there's this concern of, oh, well, if that's in question, does that change how Mikko Rantanen feels about playing here? I don't think it so suddenly does that. And it does feel like an agent just trying to sweeten the negotiation conversations, especially following the Draisaitl contract. That already kind of kicked this off, I think, knowing the cap can go up, but also, with recent reports of it going up even more than was expected beforehand. Yes. I think all of these things play into why this is a very reasonable thing to come out right now. I don't love to hear it. C-Mac told us he didn't expect it to drag on too far into the season, but I think these different factors have kind of played into, from his side of the negotiations, being able to have these conversations for a little bit longer and try to maximize what he ends up getting at the other side of it. And I won't hit the panic button until, I don't know, I'm not going to give it a date, but yeah. I'm not worried about losing Mikko Rantanen just yet.
No, I'm not either. And like, I will say, like, hearing that did make me pause just a little bit. Like, well, they're at least aware of what their options are out there. And also a couple things. Feeling like you can get $14 million, making you the highest paid player in the NHL is one thing. Actually going out and getting $14 million on the open market is a completely different thing.
I didn't know his agent is the same as Draisaitl.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense then.
Yeah. To me, again, like this is one where I was told in the summer that these negotiations were not necessarily like ongoing every day, but that we're in a very good spot. Both sides knew where the other were at. They were working towards, getting something done. Leon Draisaitl gets the deal done, and Elliot Friedman comes out and says, I don't think this makes him not sign in Colorado, but this has definitely changed the conversation a little bit and the negotiation a bit. To me, a lot of the conversation is, are the Avs willing to go over an internal cap of $12.6 million for Nathan MacKinnon? And again, when you look at these reports, like, okay, so he thinks he can go out and get $14 million. You presume that's across 7 years, $14 million per year for 7 years. that puts, if you add the 8th year on, which only the Colorado Avalanche can give Mikko Rantanen, if you add that 8th year on and use that same total contract value, you come to 12.25 per season, 8 years. That's below your internal cap of 12.6. And to me, what that tells us is that's roughly the number that Mikko Rantanen and his agent are at. We think he's north of a $12 million player. You want to keep him under Nate? Fine. But we think he should be right under where Nathan MacKinnon is currently at, especially if the cap actually does go up $9 million this summer, as is right now being reported, even though Gary Bettman did his best to refute those reports. Elliot Friedman doesn't put something out there for no reason. I totally get why this is the number, and I get, like you said, why it happened right now. I'm still not concerned, but it is something to keep an eye on.
100%. I think people look at Mikko's performance, and it's interesting. He just won second star in the month of November and has had an incredibly productive month, but there's still this feeling of he's not doing enough to be justifying $14 million in the open market, as if Mikko Rantanen came to media and said, I deserve that much, and I will settle for nothing less. But for what it's worth, he did have a really impressive month. Even though the team hasn't been doing great and the goal scoring has kind of been down, his hat trick kind of bumps that up, obviously, just in the overall totals. But 11 total goals, 4 game-winning goals, scoring in 7 of 14 games in the month, leading the league, tied for even strength goals at 10, tied in 8th place. Just a league leader, honestly, in a few categories. Game-winning goals, tied for 3rd. Goals in general, tied for 4th. Even strength goals, power play goals. He's in the points leader conversation in a lot of different ways. That's a really talented player. No matter how you feel about sometimes his engagement or sometimes his defensive plays, it's a really, really good player you don't want to part ways with for nothing. I think maybe people are seeing his value being talked about in a way that they're willing to consider him for trade conversations.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet either.
No.
He's too important to the construction of the top 6, and it's struggling right now. But you take him out, it's not going to work.
This isn't Moneyball here. You can't replace a 55 goal scorer with 3 20 goal scorers and expect it to have the same impact. Like, what this team is, without question, unequivocally, not even a second thought of my brain, worse without Mikko Rantanen than they are with Mikko Rantanen.
He can be a frustrating player because you see he's so good.
Right.
You are like, well, why can't it be this good all the time and always?
Yeah. If you told me that they traded Mikko Rantanen for Connor Bedard, I'd go, okay. I could live with that, I guess. Because you're sending off a 55 goal scorer. Even as good as a guy like Connor Bedard is projected to be, he's not a 55 goal scorer right now. He's not a 100+ point player multiple seasons in a row. Like, I think people see Nathan MacKinnon. I think people see Cale Makar. And I think they forget that Mikko Rantanen is an elite all-world winger in the NHL. That 31 other teams would give up a lot to bring in.
For the Avs to be able to have a Makar, a Taves, a Rantanen, a MacKinnon, I think people also, maybe one, that's where some of the expectation around those players comes from. This is how the team has decided to construct itself, intentionally to be top heavy. That's so much so that they've been frugal with their goaltending. And that's why they can't just get John Gibson, because people are frustrated at taking on more of a cap hit with Wedgwood. But imagine what kind of starting goaltender money they'd have to make room for if they made a bigger swing. I think it's because of what they've invested in the top of this lineup that I think people fairly have expectations around then. MacKinnon, Casey Middlestat now, Mikko Rantanen. So I don't think it's wrong that people grow frustrated with the Rantanens of the world sometimes, just based on how this team is constructed. But he is really special, and they're lucky to have this team with so many elite players at the top.
Just to answer vaguely Sober's question here, Gibson is washed. Why does his name keep coming up? Exactly. That this is the goalie market that we're in. You're not wrong. John Gibson is not the goalie he once was, but he's one of the few names that's out there that could potentially be an upgrade. That's the situation we're in. We're going to keep an eye on Mikko Rantanen. Let's talk a little bit about Casey Middlestat. But first, Chloe, I believe we've got a clip from Jared Bednar this morning queued up. Let's hear what Coach had to say talking about Casey Middlestat and the struggles recently.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he's in a little bit of a slump, if you want to call it that, right now. But he did have a great start to the season. Obviously, had a really good summer with his training, and gets out to a great start when it comes to the production side of it. I know that's part of it. Like, good players, skilled players want the production to feel good about their game. That's where they know they have to, and we rely on them to contribute on a nightly basis. So I think he's probably a little frustrated in his game, but for us to have a guy that can play in that 2-hole and play in all situations and help us create offense with some of the high-end wingers that we got, I think is really important. His position, his line mates, they've been the most inconsistent probably out of any line that we've had this year because of the injuries. So I know that's difficult. He's just got to keep plugging away. And, maybe a return to Buffalo will help spark his game. It's always a little added incentive when you're going back to your original team.
One of the bright spots for the start of the season, no doubt, has been what was Casey Middlestat. We're now going on about 10 games here where the production just has not really been there. And there's even been some effectiveness of his that has, excuse me, I like hiccuped, burped all at once. Oh my gosh. 32. Jared Bednar said last night, he's not moving his feet enough. The effort isn't there, and he wants to see him get back more engaged. Casey Middlestat said as much this morning that, these last 10 games haven't been my best. I feel like I'm moving my feet a little bit more in these last couple. Megan, your thoughts on Casey Middlestat? He plays a really important role for this team.
I think it's nothing that I've become too worried about because Bednar mentions it. He's had probably the most changes in terms of line mates throughout this year. And so much of how he plays, I think, I've described him as a chameleon. He's very versatile and kind of adopts good things about the players he's playing alongside. And I think what could be challenging is in inheriting Valnichushkin as a line mate at times. I think the top six has changed, and I think he's trying to figure out in terms of seniority where he fits in. Like before, I think it was clear the designation and seniority with players like Kovalenko and Ivan and Cal Ritchie. I think that he's trying to find his footing within that. And so I think he's not driving play the way that a centerman should. I don't know that that was necessarily his strength so much as playmaking. And I think that's where some of the loss of foot speed comes into play too, is I think he's looking to what others are doing around him a little too much and not being the leader on that line. And I think it's worked because he's been I think he assumed more of that responsibility at the start of the year than he's taken on more recently. I don't want to psychoanalyze the reasons why that is beyond. I think he's just adjusting to new talent around him right now in a lot of ways. And I'm not too worried just based on the start that he's had, but also what we saw in the playoffs and after the trade deadline last year. I still think that there's so much upside in this player. I like that they have a true second line center now too. I think that they need to find a different solution on the top unit, which might mean Casey Middlestat moving on to the second unit. I don't necessarily want to classify it as a demotion, but I do really want to see him figure out things 5-on-5 with his line mates presently, because I do think that's the line that just hasn't really clicked as of late. Like, I know the top guys as a whole aren't really getting it done, but I think his struggles are also kind of holding other people back as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a long season. I never expected Casey Middlestat show up and be like an 80 or 90 point guy. So that means that you're going to go through stretches where you don't pick up a ton of points. You want to see him figure out the consistency part at some point. But for the most part, yeah, I'm not overly concerned about where Casey Middlestat's at right now. And as Jared Bednar alluded to, he has probably had the largest rotating cast of players that he's playing with this season. I'll be keeping a closer eye on him tomorrow night in Buffalo. I told you guys at the beginning of the show that we were going to talk. We were going to hear from Jared Bednar about the injuries. I asked him this morning, like, well, golly jeepers, gee whiz, are you guys starting to get a little bit frustrated? So we're going to hear from Jared. But first, how would you guys like to get through the holidays without having to make your mortgage payment? Well, go to trustedamerican.com to see how they can help you refinance your home and not have to make any payments until February 2025. Trusted American salary-based mortgage consultants want to help you get into a better rate and lower your monthly payments. And right now, they will cover the cost of your appraisal. That's a $650 value right there. Go to trustedamerican.com or go to trustedamerican.com to see how much money they can save you today. I normally call out our QR code, which is not ready. It was on the show over the weekend, but it's not ready yet. trustedamerican.com. See how much money they can save you. See if you can not have to make a mortgage payment until February. Megan, let's talk about injuries, but first let's hear from Jared Bednar talking about that. Yeah, this can get a little bit frustrating after a while.
Well, so the couple things that we talk about is, number one, we don't want to change our expectations for the way we play, how hard we work, the habits that we play with. Like, it's always a work in progress, but we want our guys to be building those details into our game for the long haul. Number two, you still have to adjust expectations of what winning tonight, tomorrow night, what it's going to look like. Like, it's not going to be perfect, but we still got to find a way to grind out wins, and we've done a decent job of that so far. I want them to kind of wear our injuries and our lineup. Not that I'm not happy with what guys are doing, but I want the whole team, like, I want the young guys to think of it like we're winning games and I'm here and I'm doing everything I can. So, like, wear it as a badge of honor. I want our veteran guys and our leaders and our top guys to wear it as a badge of honor as well. Like, you're missing a lot of key players, a lot of scoring. Wins aren't as easy to come by as what we would like them to be right now. But I want them to take a lot of pride in where we're at and what we're doing, and just like keep grinding away and carving out some points here on this road trip. And eventually it's got to come around. Like, I don't expect to be missing 6 guys the whole year.
Yep.
Thanks.
That was a line that you referred to a little bit earlier, Megan. I don't expect, eventually it's going to turn around. I don't expect to, be missing 6 guys all year. So, Ross Colton is an option on this trip, potentially getting a guy back. He said he would want to start Ross Colton on the wing if they get him back. But, like, look, these guys say all the right things. Jared Bednar and the coaching staff, I think, have the right approach when it comes to these injuries. From a coaching standpoint of, you can only deal with the guys that are in the lineup, right? Can't concern yourself with the guys that are out. But after a certain point in that coaching room, how frustrating is this? Every time it feels like you're taking a step forward, you take 2 steps back, month to month, week to week. All right, we get a guy finally down to day skating on the ice. Well, now this guy's out. The defense had gone this whole season so far with really kind of being the consistent back-to-back games. You get 2 week-to-week injuries with Oliver Shillington and Josh Manson. I think he did a decent job of staying pretty diplomatic, but I definitely sensed a little bit of this would be really nice if it would stop.
And there's this feeling of it can't get worse. It's been so bad for so long. It's like a perpetual state of badness. So it can't really get worse from here, right? Right? Like, he's almost
Right.
asking the universe, like, please, God.
Right.
But I do believe, there's optimism around the return of Ross Colton at the end of this road trip because that is the earliest possible timeline in the initial timeline we were given. That's welcome news that it wasn't
Yes.
like the Jonathan Drouin injury that was day to day and then became week to week and then he came back and got hurt again.
Right.
That was probably worst case scenario. This is the first time in a little while now that there's been best case scenario in terms of Ross Colton coming back ahead of schedule. Put it in quotes.
Right.
It's on the lower end of what was estimated for him. That's really great to see.
Right.
It's an unusual feeling that they haven't had much this year. And I'm going to anchor myself to it and hope that this is the sign of things really turning around for
There
this
you
team.
go. Gonna hang all of your mental health on this one, eh?
No, because this Josh Manson business, it's like, people were pretty unhappy with him lately. But he is valuable to this team. You
Very.
don't want to lose Josh
No.
Manson. I know he's made some boneheaded mistakes, and I think those are what stand out in a glaring way and make you feel, oh man, this was such a mistake. But he's actually still one of their better defensive players. Those boneheaded mistakes just really stand out. You don't want to lose a guy like that. I think so much so, calling up Keaton Middleton when Jacob Jacob McDonald is right there says a lot about how they value Manson, the type of player that he is, why it's something a little bit different from what they have as an option. I don't think Keaton Middleton's the answer.
No.
I would have preferred to see McDonald there. But I think, again, it's just a reflection of how they feel about Manson. And I am not going to be so quick to take for granted what he did bring, even if there were some boneheaded mistakes lately.
You know what? I don't need to dunk on Keaton Middleton on a Monday afternoon. I don't need to do that. I'm with you. I co-sign everything you just said. This team has dealt with injuries in the past. This feels like maybe one of the most frustrating situations that they've found themselves in.
Because I didn't do the math, but I want to say it's still close to like 24, 25 million cap worth of players missing from this lineup. The significance of the players that they're missing is still, and Landeskog's really driving that bus, but it's still so significant. They're not just getting injuries and losing players. It's the players that they really count on being in the lineup. It's, there's been criticism around the front office, and I don't think criticism at this point is totally unfair, but the way this team was constructed in the offseason was not counting on this.
No.
It's not that they did such a terrible job. They've just had to peel back so far into their depth charts in a way that nobody was expecting. No one was expecting Ivan to be a full-time NHLer this year.
Right.
It's
Nikita Prishepov is on his second call-up.
Because on the Eagles, Poland's hurt, Steinberg's hurt, Foodie's hurt, Pavel's hurt. They've had to dig so deep. The injuries are organization-wide. It's really hard to plan around this many happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you kind of have to throw your hands back a little bit too and marvel at how many things had to come together to create this bad of a situation.
Yeah. And that's my, again, we're here to provide context. That's how I'll end this show. For me, what I would remind folks is just like, hey, this has been a ride. Like the first 25 games here have been a ride for the Avalanche and their fans. I know it's hard, and I'm never going to tell someone how to be a fan. Be a fan however you want. This is just my advice, my 2 cents. Try to enjoy this ride a little bit, knowing that there's going to be ups and downs, knowing that there's going to be stretches where it doesn't look great because the roster isn't great. The roster that they've assembled and paid for looks really good. That's not what we have here. And there's guys constantly coming in and out. And it is absolutely, to your point, Megan, these are professional athletes. It is absolutely their responsibility to be able to separate that stuff and find a way to drive results. That being said, there's adjusted expectations for this version of this roster, just as Jared Bednar talked about. So I know it's not always fun. I know there's things that people always want to see better, but there's context to what's happening here, and it's all right.
I know we have to end it. Can
We
we
don't
talk
have to.
about the
We
power play briefly?
It's just Chloe back there.
It's just Chloe, and it's because I often feel special teams are a reflection of other things going wrong in the team. Like you can kind of, it's a close glimpse of what is going wrong throughout the rest of the lineup. And so Middlestat, Rantanen, McKinnon going through a little bit of a production drought in different ways. You look at that top power play unit and their inability to convert as of recently. And I think there are little takeaways that you can gather from there. At the top of it is their overpassing. And it's not totally new to just this stretch. They were doing it a little earlier in the year, but they were having more success. And there's a couple reasons for that. I think you pointed out Edmonton snuffing out the outlet to the point in their coverage on the PK against the Avs power play last night. And it was interesting because Rantanen kind of corroborated how aggressive they were in their coverage on the PK too, with guys pulling up on them so fast. And I think that was a predictability component because you look at how the Avs were scoring recently on the power play, and it was Cale Makar either from distance, top of the slot. And so I think they were very specifically trying to counter what was working for the Avs on the power play recently. Good strategy. Teams should do that.
Right.
And that's why I think we saw Taves quarterbacking that top unit brief periods last night just to give them something different, not even as punishment to Cale Makar. It's just clear that other teams have pre-scouted what has been working for them and are trying to counter it in a very specific way. And here's where the issue comes into play a little bit here is that's what good teams do. The Avs have been trying to return to things that have worked for them on the power play specifically. You know, McKinnon and a feed to the slot, that bumper spot has had a kind of a revolving door of players. And at the start of the year, they were able to put pucks in the back of the net. It's not working the same way, even though McKinnon's still getting pucks there. Some of it, I think, is the shooter just being a different shooter, and that's part of it. But I think teams have been able to track what's been working well for the Avs on the power play and counter it. And here's where I think there's a bigger issue. The Avs power play, what has made it consistently so good year after year, despite having some of the same 5 guys on it year after year, is they can adapt and overcome and use a little bit of deception to do things differently on the power play. It's even been a strength of Rantanen in the past. He could be the guy who's firing pucks from the right circle, or he'll carry the puck below the goal line and find his guy through an impossible seam. I think we're seeing them play a little too cautious. Like they're overpassing the puck, so they're overcycling. That's giving teams time and space to counter what they're doing. It's one pass too many, and I think that's why teams are able to pull up on them so aggressively. I think that it's overthinking. I think this is a team that's a little too in their heads right now, to go back to the kind of morale and low confidence conversation we were having. Players who are typically goal scorers like Nathan McKinnon not scoring goals has to have some kind of toll on them. And I think it's captured a little bit in what's been going wrong for them on the power play. I think they're in their heads and they're overthinking things a little bit too much, because when they strayed from their process earlier in the year, that's when we saw the worst results. And I think there's maybe even a fear of mistakes right now because they feel like they can't afford to make any. Things are already so bad in terms of not full confidence in goaltending and guys being so shorthanded just because they're so depleted as a lineup, that I think they look at that as, I can't afford to step too outside of my comfort zone right now, so I'm going to stick to what's working. And I think that's what's hurting them on the power play, because their strength on the man advantage is being able to use a couple of different strategies. And I think that's, I don't know what they need to do to prepare for it otherwise, but I think that is what's going wrong for them right now.
You made that comment of overpassing, and I hadn't really thought about it in this way, but like it, in terms of the predictability thing, you're taking 3 players, Nate, Cale, and Mikko, and guys that are like elite shooters. And by them right now having that tendency to overpass a little bit, like it almost feels like for other teams, it's like, cool, you're taking the threat of an elite shooter away from me. I'm gonna play this pass because I know that's where you're likely gonna go. And again, that I don't have any data to support that. Just, you saying that spurred that thought in my head of how even in that last game against Edmonton, how many times did you and I, puck, oop, there you go, shoot it. One too many. Bobbled puck, play along the boards, puck up and out. Like is just one too many. And I wonder if, I do wonder if that's something that teams are keying in on, of like, hey, they're trying to make that one right when we think they're going to shoot. They're trying to make one last little slip to the middle of the ice, or one last bump pass over to the wall. Give them that shooting lane because we think they're going to try to make one more pass, and they are right now. I don't know. Any other thoughts on today, Megan? I'm looking just see if there's any other questions or anything like that we didn't get to. But any other thoughts before we jump out for today?
No.
Okay. My last thing, so from Abby here, I truly still believe we can come back from this. The Avs don't need to come back from anything. They just need to get back on the stable track they're on and win games at the clip that they've gotten used to doing that, and they're going to be fine. Like, they aren't so far out that they need to come back. They're right there. They got to get some things ironed out, and you don't have to worry about them coming back. I think that's going to do it. We'll be back at it tomorrow. So if you guys have questions, make sure to come hang out. Drop your questions in the chat. Drop them on Twitter for either of us or at Gorilla Sports. That's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm Jesse. She's Megan. This has been Gorilla Sports Off Ice here in the Gorilla Sports Studios, powered by Trusted American Mortgage. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.